Hi, I'm Walt Wager, and today I'm going to talk about spindle turning, and in particular we're going to take a thin piece of wood, half inch by about 8 inches long. We're going to make a hairpin and do some tapering, some beads and some coves on this small piece of wood. We're going to do it between centers, and because the wood is thin, I've already put a cut in both ends that the spur drive can get into, and to the other side will go into the live center. So one of the first things we're going to do is to put this on the spur drive and bring up the live center on the other side to support this piece as it turns. And the reason I put the grooves in there is so that this spur drive sits and seats itself squarely in this wood without splitting it. I don't want to put a whole lot of pressure on it from the tailstock in, or it might bend and break as we taper it. With using a spindle roughing gouge, and I'm going to start on the live center end and just rough this thin spindles around. Using the bevel on the wood, getting a cut, and just moving it across the wood. Turn it off and move the tool rest. And I turn it off so that I don't run the tool rest into the spur drive or into the wood and potentially break it. So now I'm up on this end, put the bevel on the wood, bring up the handle, and rough this piece to round. Okay, now I'm going to taper the piece for this hairpin. I'm going to go back down to this side of the tailstock side of the wood, put the bevel on the wood, and start my taper. I'm about halfway up, start the taper down to the end. I'm using a piece of maple here, so it's not a soft wood. Nice sharp spindle gouge, spindle roughing gouge. And you notice I have it at about a 45-degree angle, so I'm planing that wood off much like I would with a skew. And I'm going to go from a half inch down to about 3/16. Now as it gets thinner, you can see the wood flexing. I can put my finger behind here and support it as I move the spindle gouge down on the taper. I'm going to do a real light cut. Down to the end. When I get this far, I can go ahead and sand that taper, and I'll start with 100 grit paper, and I put it on a little Velcro pad here so that I can flatten that paper right out. Any tool marks or little digs will come right out. Then I'm steadying the spindle with my fingers a little bit. I don't want to press real hard on this as I'm sanding. I'm going to take a finer grit paper and smooth it out. I'm going from 100 grit to 220 grit. I'm going to come back to the top end, take my spindle roughing gouge again, and cut this down a bit. Just keep cutting down the diameter. Getting about a 45-degree angle on the cut and smoothing it off. And coming back again with my sandpaper, my 100 grit, my fine paper. I'm going to put some beads and coves on this end. So I'm going to make some marks where I'm going to put my beads and coves. I'm going to put a bead, a cove, a bead, and a cove, and a bead. So here I'll have a bead, a cove, a bead, a cove, and a bead. Got an extra line in here, we don't need that. Okay? Make this bead a little bit bigger. Okay. So now, in order to turn this, I think I'm going to try to zoom in the camera a bit. It looks like that's as close as I can go. I'm going to use a 3/8 inch spindle gouge. I'm going to rest the gouge in the center of the bead and then rotate the flute to about a 3 o'clock position and cut that bead, and then I'm going to put it back on the center and rotate it in a counterclockwise position to about 9 o'clock to cut the other side of the rest the spindle gouge on the center of my mark here. Turn it to 3 o'clock position while lifting the handle. Put the bevel on the center, rotate the gouge, and pull up the handle. To do the cove, I'm going to start toward the middle, put the bevel on the wood like this, around 11 o'clock position, and the other side I'm going to hold up. I'm saying, sorry, it's about 11 o'clock with the flute. This is about 1 or 2 o'clock with the flute. And someone made this equivalent to scooping ice cream. You're scooping that out down to the bottom there. Stop at the bottom. So you're cutting downhill. So now here's another bead. We'll start in the middle. Roll it around to 3 o'clock. Roll it to 9 o'clock. Roll it to 3 o'clock. Roll it to 9 o'clock. Another cove here, start toward the middle, cutting downhill, a little bit at a time, we'll get there. Another bead. Start at the top, roll it to 3 o'clock, roll it to 9 o'clock, roll it to 3 o'clock, roll it to 9 o'clock, and another cove. Cut from the outside in toward the middle. Scooping ice cream. And we have room for another bead here, so we'll just go ahead and put another bead on the top. Rolling from top to 3 o'clock, top to 9 o'clock, back to 3 o'clock. Now the transitions between bead and coves are often called fillets, and they're little flats. And you can take the spindle gouge and come in from the cove side toward the bead and create that little flat. Little fillet. And often you'll have to go back and clean up the cove, cut the bead to make it nice sharp transition. When you're practicing this, don't worry too much about being perfect. Just practice it. The more you do, the better you'll get. And also we'll transition to the pin part down here. 240 grit paper, just pulling it underneath like this. Try not to take our corners off our fillets. And then it's just a matter of parting it off. Now to part it off between centers, you can't cut both. You can't cut both pieces at the same time and have it hang there. So one piece is going to have to be cleaned up later and sawn off. And I like to leave this end until last. I'm just going to cut it down as close as I can without cutting it off. Then I'm going to come down to the other end. I'm going to use the spindle gouge, put the bevel right on the wood. I'm going to support the wood with my finger behind it, and just go ahead and start cutting that off. I'll come down from both sides, both the back side, the tailstock side, and the pin side, and it will come off. And now all I have to do is take my sandpaper and clean up the ends of the piece that came off there, off the pin end. And this side, I'll cut off a little Japanese flexible saw, clean up the end with sandpaper. And you can finish this any way you want. You can finish it with lacquer, or you could just put wax on it and buff it. But there's your hairpin.